Can a trick be too perfect? And what does that even mean? And if it's true, what does that mean not just for magic, but for living life? What's up, fellow hobbyists? Michael here. Today is one of the more theory or discussion videos. So as those get formed, you're going to see those in a playlist on the channel. So Rick Johnson, in his work Hierophant, I think I'm saying that right, in 1971 proposed this theory. And I was exposed to it, I think, in just general magic discourse, potentially before I read it, but I was definitely introduced to it by the time I read it in a wonderful collection of essays that I highly recommend you checking out, called Magic in Mind. This was put together by Joshua J. of Vanishing Inc., and it's provided for free as a PDF on Vanishing Inc. What's really cool is that recently they also produced an audiobook version. I still have yet to check out the audiobook version, but I love that they're providing these free resources to magicians that sort of curate and compile really good theory. I really love the discussion of theory as a magician, and I feel like it's on YouTube. There's definitely magicians that put it out there, but it can be harder to find, or it might not have theory always tagged in the video. You sort of reach a certain step of your journey in magic where you're not just trying to learn new tricks, learn tricks, but understand how to be better as a performer of the tricks you already know. Let's cover Rick Johnson's original essay, his premises, his theory, his conclusion, and his suggested solutions to that conclusion. And of course, we're going to discuss my opinion of this, whether I agree or disagree with it or not, and what this, if anything, means for not just magic, but living life. Because believe it or not, I think there's a lot in magic theory that almost provides, by way of metaphor or parable even, sort of an allegory for life and how we might live life better, not just be better magicians. I also really love philosophy. I love the study of philosophy, and I love following all the podcasts and YouTube channels about philosophy, not because I think I'm a super smart boy, but because I just love listening to the discussions, and I think I definitely buy into the claim that all sciences, potentially even all artistic pursuits, are just applied philosophy, if you take things down to its root. So it's the study of knowledge, and the way that that study is pursued is through arguments, because we make claims and we try to back up those claims, or there's certain things that we have to postulate in order to make conclusions off of them. And just understanding the pursuit of that, understanding logical inconsistencies, understanding logic itself. Anyway, the reason I bring up philosophy is that very wonderfully in his essay, Rick Johnson uses philosophical format in order to bring his argument forward for the two perfect theory. So his premises are as follows. Premise 1, 20th century man, or in our case, 21st century people, no longer attributes the magician with supernatural powers. So he's speaking to sort of a post-Enlightenment, post-industrial revolution, just at the age that modernity was at, or post-modernity is at today for our case. People know that illusions are illusions. And to me, this is a good thing, personally. I don't want to actually pull the wool over people's eyes. There's a great documentary from the magician James Randi. His life is so fascinating, and he went on the attack for a lot of charlatans, and you can see it in that documentary how, as a magician who wants to only use deception to entertain people, he went after them in order to expose how they were using magic tricks to deceive people. There's various ways that people were doing that, deceive people in a way that made it look like they actually had the powers they were claiming to have. So that's premise 1, is 20th century man no longer attributes the magician with supernatural powers. Premise 2, he said, was that to rational man, the unknown is unacceptable. So he's speaking to like, hey, if you're confronted with this and you know that, rationality should find an answer for you, it's going to kind of frustrate your mind. So that's premise 2. To rational man, the unknown is unacceptable. From there, he goes on to discuss 3 hypotheses, and they are as follows. 1, man will find or invent an answer for that which baffles him. So this is going off of premise 2, that the unknown is unacceptable. 2, that answer need not be completely rational and or consistent with available data. So this is the idea of, I just need an explanation, which is funny because the idea is that I'm a rational person. That doesn't seem rational, but then my sort of replacement for that fact can be irrational. It doesn't have to be perfect as long as it's an alternative solution, right? When confronted with the unexplainable, we're content to explain it with something we can't even explain. And number 3, man is flexible in changing his answers in the light of more complete or acceptable data. So the idea that, hey, I'll come up with an answer, and then if a better answer comes my way, I'll jump to that one. So he then says, quote, if we combine premise 1 and the first 2 hypotheses developed in premise 2, we can now understand why the spectator leaves the performance of a magician explaining or shrugging off all tricks done with a, it went up his sleeve, or it's done with mirrors, or some such inane explanation completely inconsistent with the facts. But to him, it's an acceptable answer, end quote. He then goes on to say, quote, however, if we now introduce hypothesis 3, we can easily see that the spectator is open to suggestion for his solution, and in some cases, it would be wise for us to provide him with a possible solution of our own choosing, and which would accomplish the following. 1, lead him away from the correct solution. 2, be acceptable to him. 3, not detract from the effect of the trick. And 4, give the magician full credit for his skill. And so at this point of the essay, Rick Johnson's sort of values that he wants to protect are coming into view. He's confronted with this problem of people aren't just going to be wowed by the impossible and believe that the impossible is true or real, which again, this is me talking here. That's good, in my opinion, for magic as an art form. I don't want someone to leave my magic tricks thinking that I can do something supernatural. That's not really the point of the art form, in my opinion. And so that's a good point on his part. And then he says, we also want to protect the value of not detracting from the effect of the trick. So if the problem is such, how do we protect the effect? But also, how do we protect the magician and giving the magician credit for his skill? So it's the effect and it's the magician that are the values at stake that Rick Johnson is wanting to try to protect with his solutions for these problems. He discusses some examples of this problem, and so then he makes this, what he calls the tenets of the 2 perfect theory, and I quote, some tricks by virtue of their perfection become imperfect. Conversely, some tricks by virtue of their imperfection become perfect. So his initial example to show this theory is one in which the magician's deck of cards is given to a spectator. They shuffle it while the magician is in the other room, and then coming back, he tells them what card they chose from the shuffled deck. So in Rick Johnson's example, he brings up the issues of what the spectator will do in their mind after that, which is that it is a trick deck because the conditions were, in his words, too perfect. They were able to shuffle the deck. The magician wasn't present to do any sleight of hand. So by eliminating so many factors that you would think make the trick stronger, the audience member is left to think this is a trick deck. And so Rick Johnson is saying this is a problem. It's reductive. They just go, trick deck, because ironically, by making it so impossible with being in the other room and letting them shuffle it, etc., they're led to a conclusion that is not very flattering for the magician. They're able to just say, it's a trick deck. So then he proposes some ways to imperfect tricks as actually a format to make them stronger. The effect is preserved, and to preserve the reputation of the magician to the spectator. The spectator is impressed by the magician and his skill. So his proposals are essentially red herrings, I would say, that allow the spectator to think, maybe this is where he did something, and oh wow, I'm amazed he was able to do it that secretly or in that span of time. He proposes still being in the room instead of being outside the room. He proposes handling the cards yourself. It's interesting that this is proposed as an imperfection, because within this, he's displaying methods that you can use to show that all the cards are different. And then the third imperfection is interesting. He proposes, if let's say you've had the spectator shuffle the deck, select a card, he suggests you come back and handling the deck a little bit, even though that's not the method for ascertaining the card. And he also recommends like having a procedure which reveals the card instead of you just divining the card. Similarly, another imperfection is to have you handle the deck a little bit at the beginning. So before diving into more of my thoughts on it, I'd like to read his summary of the essay, because he does provide some more examples and discussions, but here's his concluding quote. He says, quote, "In summary, the explanation of the two perfect theory has attempted to point out that man must have an answer or solution to those things that bewilder him. It behooves magicians to avoid leaving a spectator one accurate path to follow, leading to the modus operandi, or to leave the onlooker paths that take credit away from the magician himself. It's better to direct the spectator to follow a path of the magician's own choosing, leading him to the conclusion that the magician is, quote, some clever devil. That's the name of the game, baby," end quote. So that is the basic premises, the theory, the values at stake that he's trying to protect, and the conclusion and suggested solutions that he has in his essay. I definitely recommend you reading the full essay, as I wasn't able to get into every example he provided. So what do I think? Well, it's first worth mentioning that I might disagree a little bit with the semantics of the argument, but that doesn't necessarily mean I disagree with the argument itself. He talks about it being the too perfect theory, and for what he's meaning by that, I understand. But perhaps this could have been called the not perfect enough theory, or rather the almost perfect theory. Imagine you're in high school and you just got a 99% on your literature test or something. You know where that 1% was docked from. You know that one question that you got wrong, right? But let's say that you got a 75. Maybe you know all the different questions that got docked off, but maybe you don't exactly know what you could have exactly done to study better, right? You just know nebulously, wow, there's lots of different topics I should have studied better. That's maybe one example that helps me get toward the semantic disagreement. I think the way Rick Johnson is meaning too perfect is not in a literal sense, but more in the it's quiet, too quiet. You know that quote where it's like, it's quiet, too quiet, ergo something must be going on. In the same way, the spectator sees a trick and is saying, this is impressive, too impressive. Ergo, the magician must be using some cheap trick. He must be using a trick deck. Rick Johnson's proposed solutions seem to be to allow some red herrings or to imperfect a trick a little bit in a way that makes it stronger, or at least if the audience member is going to think anything, they're going to think that you're really good at what you do. And so this is such an interesting theory. I've mulled this over, and I think I agree. So the question is for you, do you agree with this? I think the question you have to ask to see if you agree with it is, must it be our goal to make the spectator think that we are accomplishing the magic? And this is where I halted and really thought about this. Is it my goal to make the spectator think that I'm doing the magic? I think yes. And here's why that was a difficulty for me, but then why in the end I still chose that pathway. Why is that a difficulty? I don't think it feels fun to think I'm being arrogant. I don't think we want to say, yes, look at me, I'm awesome. Of course, there's an arrogant way to represent yourself as the, look at me, I'm a cool magician. There's definitely arrogant magicians out there. I'm sure I've been arrogant sometimes when performing, and that's what I hate seeing, and that's what I don't want to do, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But you can still pursue this value without doing that. You can still pursue this value without being that guy. Let's say you're a musician and someone comes up to you after you've performed and they say, you're amazing. And you're like, no, man, I didn't make that music happen. It was just the vibes. You know what I'm saying? That would be so weird if you don't at least just take the credit. Allow someone to say, you did that. And so there is a degree to which you can be humble. You can not be weird, not be that guy, but you do have to position yourself as the source of the fun in this scenario. You are saying, I have studied illusions, I've studied magic, and I want to show you something that you've potentially never seen before. It's going to surprise you, it's going to amaze you, and this moment was achieved for fun and entertainment because of the dedication I poured into my craft. And so from that standpoint, you can be a humble person who is just trying to create a fun experience, but in service of the effect, channel the attention back to yourself as I made this happen, right? Not in a way that's trying to be arrogant, but I made this happen. What I'm saying here comes some from also what I've read from Strong Magic by Darwin Ortiz. I reference him a lot, I think, probably, because I definitely recommend his book, Strong Magic, and he discusses some of that as well, of you kind of have to point the attention back to you, but for good reason in a magic trick. I think he was saying it more from a standpoint of credibility and getting gigs from Darwin Ortiz's book, but from what I remember, it does sort of cross-link here. And that brings us to the next idea that I think is really worth discussing, which is that people know magic isn't real, right? It's romantic to think we can just show our spectators an illusion, something that's impossible, and that they'd accept that. But like I said at the top, is that even what we really want? I don't think so. So it might feel like a necessary evil, but if you steer them down some false alleyways that at the end of the day leave them confused as to how you did it, but they know you did it, that is enough. That accomplishes the goal. So as I've really processed this, I think this can sound cynical, right? It's give them some red herrings and make them impressed with you. But I think there's a side to this that is actually really beautiful and profound, potentially. People know that magic is illusions to the point where they know that people are making entire entertainment careers out of being a magician, right? On America's Got Talent, you don't just see musicians and actors, comedians, whatever it might be, stunt performers. You also see magicians. It's a legitimate entertainment career pathway. And so the entertainer is saying, I have secret knowledge, secret skills, which enable me to present this illusion to you for your entertainment. So it'll feel real, but it's just being done through my dedication, mine, to achieving this illusion. So it's not a prideful thing to want to receive that recognition. There's definitely rude ways to do it, but the key is finding that appropriate level of humility with confidence. The humility of being approachable and fun to watch or interact with, but the confidence that someone can almost let go and rely on you to provide the entertainment of the illusion. And then when they look back on it, they're going to enjoy the illusion more if they're not cynical about it either. It's okay that they have to say, he must have done something there. Wow, what a crazy magician. It's such a hard, fine line, hard balance that I think Johnson is trying to play on here. So this also cross-links to another idea that I've heard in more than one place, I'm pretty sure. Again, it's also in Darwin Ortiz's Strong Magic, which is to never talk down about yourself to your audience. When they ask how long a certain trick took to learn, and it happens to be self-working, for example, let's say, you can know for yourself that it only took you 5 minutes to learn that trick, but I would encourage you not to tell them that. Sadly, I have made this mistake before. Here's something you could say instead. The illusion itself is very straightforward, but mastering it has taken me years. So you see what that does? This is still telling them the truth, because to master anything takes time. So you've allowed this simple truth that it's a simple illusion, but you've prevented it from seeming unimpressive. And I think that's giving yourself authentic value. And in fact, you maybe don't even need to say it's simple. You can just emphasize your dedication to your craft, which is real and is worth validating. That to me is not dipping into other territories that would be inappropriate to speak untruthfully, right? So I'm still being a performer in that mindset when I'm commenting on the tricks themselves, right? So in that way, I'm considering those extra comments before and after the trick is over for the audience's mind, and I'm considering those part of the trick, right? So there's things you say outside of the trick that are part of the trick. It's a really fascinating theory, really fascinating essay you can access for free. Go ahead and check out the Magic in Mind book on Vanishing Ink. Definitely recommend that. But what about life? Might be surprising that I'm bringing it up in this video, but what does this say about life? For me, as a magician who is a zillennial, internet raised, but I remember a time before it, here's how I'm encountering and processing this. People are living in the illusion that we can be perfect. Even cognitively knowing that we cannot be perfect, the expectations are there socioculturally. We are busy, we are hurried, we are burnt out. I've read some different books on this, and it's interesting how, as you look at the history of technological advancement and our societies and cultures, every new technological advancement has seemed to promise more leisure time. And there's some classes and books from the author Strawn Coleman that have discussed this. And all these technologies promise more leisure time, but instead what we do is fill the time, right? So it used to take days to get to another city, but you introduce automobiles and an airplane, and what do? We don't still expect the same amount of time that a carriage took. We expect you to get to Chicago or whatever in a day, because now you can ride a plane over there and get to business. So instead of giving us more free time, all these advances give us more time to fill and cram and expect more out of ourselves and each other. The floor of expectation will continue to rise throughout your lifetime. You can have business clients from anywhere now. You can also be demanded of at any time by anyone. You have YouTube celebrities hiring an editor that lives in a different time zone so that YouTuber can film their vlog, go to sleep, the editor edits while they're sleeping, they wake up, and that is ready to post. Now, obviously, that's a pretty cool life hack, and still they're sleeping out of it, but it just shows the high demand of time being filled at every moment for this idea of productivity. We don't let the gaps that new conveniences provide stay as gaps. The gaps will never stay gaps. We just fill the gaps. A new gap is created by technology or a system or whatever, and unless intentionally protected, gaps are always filled. Now, we do see and normalize imperfection more now than perhaps we ever have. We can talk about burnout. We can talk about mental health struggles. But then we just have this imperfection celebration being usurped and feeding into the same productivity machine. You can be vulnerable for clicks, or you can take it the negative route and react to people whining about their problems for clicks. You can make vulnerability part of the branding. You can make authenticity part of the image. Bo Burnham talks about this as well. It's this sort of meta-awareness, and I've certainly grappled with it. Even as I've tried to approach this YouTube channel, I want to actually be rewarded for artistic work, and that's valuable and good and okay. But it can feel cynical. It can feel like you're just a part of this machine. And to me, when I hear the words too perfect, I think of those demands. I think of the demands of this continual cycle we all head ourselves down. So what's the conclusion? How might we embrace a too perfect theory of life? Meaning, how do we purposefully imperfect? Which in this lens, I guess I'm sort of proposing as a purposeful lack of productivity sometimes, a purposeful balancing of work and life, rest and productivity, sprinkling in time alone, time with relationships, and not just meeting all of the demands of the gap fillers. How do we purposefully imperfect our lives in a healthy way? A few suggestions. 1, reduce your time on social media, especially the ones in which you find yourself comparing yourself to other people. I was watching an interview with a happiness expert. I will admit that came up on my algorithm, but he recommended this, and I really appreciated what he had to say about psychologically what's going on when we use social media more and more. It's almost a replacement for community, essentially, but it's not a good replacement. And for me, when I scroll through Instagram stories specifically, when I'm in a good space, that's fine, and I can engage with community. But sometimes I need to protect myself and say that I'm not going to scroll through them right now because I'm finding myself comparing myself to others. And it doesn't just protect me, it also protects other people, people that I do want to cheer on. If I need to take a break because I'm finding myself comparing myself to others, it protects them from me viewing their success as my failure. Does that make sense? So it actually is healthy for all parties if you take those breaks from social media. If you are trying to be a content creator, you might also make sure that you have separate private accounts so that you can go on those when you're not trying to be in business mode in your mind. Tip number 2 is to increase time for creativity and to curate or potentially even reduce the time that you are consuming media. I get this idea from Think Media. Sean Connell talks about producing more than you consume. There's a mentor from my personal life and from the books he's read and the things he's digested of recommending the idea of curation. Limiting as well, but also the idea of it's not just limiting, but what are the things that you're actually consuming yourself and where does that leave you? Tip number 3, spend time with the close people in your life. This again comes from that happiness expert. Just the fact that social media is not a replacement for real in-person relationship. 4, go to therapy. And 5, find a way to somehow do less. We've used the phrase less is more a lot, but I've liked to start telling myself and other people lately that less is less. The phrase less is more still puts the value positive on the word more. In our language, it's kind of baked in that more means better. And so by saying less is less, I'm just trying to reemphasize that the lessness is the valuable thing because we're protecting the gaps. So this includes a lot of things, but could start by trying not to take on too many projects, however much it is within your power. For more on that, I would definitely recommend a book called Slow Productivity, which has definitely transformed some of my thinking this year as I view my work. So that's the 2 perfect theory of life. The perfect is the heightened demand on your time and attention. The purposeful imperfecting of your life is to protect some of those gaps that will help you feel more balanced and less like a machine. So that's the 2 perfect theory. Tell me down below, what do you think of the 2 perfect theory for magic? And what do you think of these ideas of the 2 perfect theory applied to life? I'm looking forward to doing more theory and life discussions with you all, so be sure to subscribe and stick around for those. But until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.